So let me start with Martin, which is all yours. And you can stay right in the seat. It's perfectly fine.
Thank you to the National Academies for having me here, and to Lila for inviting me. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for having me here today, to the National Academies, to Lila for the invite. As I was introduced, I work with my hands for a living, and so I got here sort of a different way. I'm a patient and a cancer survivor. And I'm a survivor of a cancer that was preventable. In 2001, just before I was 50, I had my first colonoscopy at an academic teaching hospital. I was experiencing some bleeding. A single polyp was removed from 1 inch inside my rectum. And as it was explained to me, it had cancer cells in it. In the next 7 years, no one whose care I was under ever told me I needed to be seen or followed. My wife was employed at this institution in a position where she could ask the right questions about my care. In response to her inquiry about whether we should seek a second opinion, she was told by a GI doc who was the CEO, he's in capable hands here. There had been mention of the polyp, the cancer cells, and some blood in a September 2005 visit to my doctor. My medical history was at her fingertips. I was examined and I was told I had a hemorrhoid and that it takes 5 to 10 years for a polyp to develop. In late 2006, I complained of blood again in a routine checkup. Nothing was said, and so nothing was done. I felt assured. I did not think it was my place to question. She was the MD and I was the woodworker. Mid-August of 2007, I complained by phone of bleeding again with globs like quarters. My call was returned within the hour and my doctor's nurse said, "Don't worry, it's just a hemorrhoid." Time and time again, I trusted. The following July, I was diagnosed with a malignant neoplasm of the rectum, and I had stage 4 cancer. The hospital that I was going to advertised world-class care right in your own backyard. I did not even get what I now know to be called the standard of care. It was a term I was not familiar with, but would hear about it many times over the next year. I still remember when my home health nurse asked me what had happened. Her expression when she said, "You did not even get the standard of care." I now know rectal bleeding should be taken seriously. Mine was ignored. What a hard lesson. A whole academic healthcare system failed, and I nearly died. Because I did not speak up and ask questions, and because I finally decided to ask questions and speak up, I find myself here today. John Makepeace was a noted British furniture maker, and he told me when I first started out at a workshop that I attended, a good and successful commission starts out with good conversation. So does the care for your health. And good conversation involves listening and paying attention. Cancer can play pretty rough. If I may quote my daughter's blog, the thought that you might die was pretty bad. I had no idea that the fight to not die was going to be so grisly. It took a lot away from me, but it did not take away my spirit or my voice. After the initial diagnosis, I told myself I wanted to deal with all of it with as much grit and integrity as possible. In the first few weeks came tests and scans by technicians who were polite and caring. Then I had 2 experiences a few days apart that sent me into a tailspin. The first was with a surgeon. She said I was the worst case she'd ever seen. I asked if she could help me. She said, "I don't know if I can help you or not. You're going to have to wear a bag." I felt embarrassed and I was not certain I even knew what she was talking about. She said, "Do you want me to be your surgeon? I do everything from here to here." The nurse knocked at the exam door and came in and asked if everyone was okay. I left shaken and was pretty certain I did not want her for my surgeon. A few days later, we met with an oncologist. This time my wife was with me, and it made a difference, and I valued that a lot. The oncologist was brusque and he did not look at me when he spoke. He talked too fast, and he said, "I will resect your liver Thursday." This was Tuesday afternoon. We both left shaken. The nurse practitioner who was part of this visit called the next day to plan things, and I told her I wouldn't be coming back. And her response was, "I didn't think you would." I was discouraged. I knew I was in over my eyeballs, and I was ready to give up. And my wife disagreed. She decided to ask for some help. She spoke to a close friend in Kansas City who was a physician and a hospital administrator in St. Louis who had been a colleague. And within 48 hours, we were seeing a specialist at Siteman Cancer Center in St. Louis. And he told me this was a reoccurrence. He said it was not dug out deep enough 7 years ago, and then he pointed us in a very different direction. And everything changed after that. The new surgeon explained things well. I was told he would help me and that I was not his worst case. He said I asked a lot of questions no patient had ever asked about the surgery, and he seemed pleased to answer them. And he gave me a drawing of what was going to take place. And after the surgery, he told my wife his liver's fine. Shortly thereafter, we were told the pathology reports were the best we could have asked for. The oncologist and the radiation oncologist, the nurses, and the staff at Missouri Cancer Associates were superb. I had some pretty hard days, and I didn't think there would be any more work in wood. I was worn down and confused as to why this had to happen to me, but they were compassionate and caring. Communication was excellent. Our concerns and our worries were addressed. In fact, they asked us about our concerns and our worries. Much later, I learned my creative work allowed me to float above my troubles and my pain. While in Boone Hospital for 9 days, I made a particular and interesting observation that impressed me. At shift change, the nurse leaving the shift came to my bedside with the nurse coming on to update that person on my condition. I always try to take that time to say thank you. I'm no stranger to 12-hour workdays, but their work is not work that I could do. I had months of brilliant home health nursing care from Boone Hospital Home Care. In cold days in February, the nurse would still come and tap on the door. And then things changed. I developed a fever and my healing had stalled. And I was told I had to go to a wound center. I really just wanted my home health nurses, but I knew I needed to do as instructed. And I saw the wound care nurse and told her I felt lousy. Then came the doctor. The first thing she did is she sat next to me on a stool, and she put her hand on my arm, and she said, "We're going to help you here." The touch of the human hand and the tone of voice, I assure you, can have a positive effect on the process we call healing. She explained that they would use honey made by bees in New Zealand, that it may sound silly. It had been used on burn victims in the World Wars, and now they were having success on people who have had radiation treatment. If I may go back to the blog, call it a miracle, call it a gift from God. I call it a hard fight won by a nose. Today, Dad is cancer-free. Our family has learned there's no such thing as false hope. I'm here today thanks to remarkable, dedicated healthcare people, and a special gratitude to my wife. She was my caregiver. When I got strong, I went and I got my medical records, and I wrote to the academic hospital, and I outlined the errors that had taken place. And my hope was to keep this from happening to somebody else. 2 months later, I met with the Vice Chancellor of Medical Sciences. He was cordial, and I outlined to him just what I told you, and he told me, and I quote, "It's hard to pay a primary care doc $150,000 a year, and well, you must know what it's like in the building business." Shortly thereafter, I got a call from the Director of Clinical Effectiveness. She had been my primary care physician. She had gotten promoted during my illness. She said there was a new movement in the country and that they wanted to help me find peace with what had happened. I was to come to a meeting and bring a list of my losses. I presented to them a professional portfolio of all they'd asked for. I then spoke to what my family and I had been through and what they did wrong. Then the manager of risk management told me this was a complication. I was taken aback. I politely disagreed. Everything remained cordial. Before I left, I asked if anyone says they're sorry, and I did not get an apology. And so the conversation ended. So communication as to how we deal with medical error, it failed too. 6 months later, I would learn that an entry in my medical record would show that I had a normal colonoscopy in 2003 and in 2005. I had neither of these. A thoughtful person would ask questions about ethics. Some people already have. How do you make corrections in a climate like this? We are human and things do go wrong. When a bridge falls into the Mississippi River, when a skywalk collapses at a Hyatt, and when the space shuttle Columbia exploded in the sky, dialogue began immediately. How we deal with error and mistakes is the real measure of who we are as human beings. I have seen the finest in healthcare, and I have seen some things that are unacceptable in this industry. I wonder if we took a little more time for the patient and time for the caregiver, and let's focus on the dollar bill. My family's life would certainly be different. Change has got to come from the top, but the catalyst for the change is going to come from the bottom. I came of age in the 60s. Prior to all this, I had a successful woodworking business for 28 years, and I never had cross words with my customer. And I know my way around. And I was taught when you see things that are not right, you do your part to make them right. And for me, up until now, that was usually done with my hands and my back. This time it's different. If necessary to quote the poet, Bob Dylan, we'll shake their windows and we'll rattle their walls. I don't really want to do this, but I'm asked, and it's not easy. The loss of personal privacy is now a part of who I am, but I don't want to let it define me. I want to be remembered for my workmanship. I still enjoy some of the work in my shop, but I'm pursuing other creative interests that provide a distraction from chronic pain. I feel I've achieved my goal of doing this with integrity. Mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, I've done well. It has allowed me to forgive and to harbor no hard feelings. Forgiveness beyond what I was taught, but forgiveness that sets me free. And I've weighed every word here for accuracy and fairness. And I've also left some things unsaid for a lot of reasons. The physical change, the pain, and the reality of daily living I do my best with, repeated careless mistakes, I find unacceptable. And how all this has been dealt with, I find very disheartening. The last time I spoke, I followed the CEO of Plaintree. He's also a CEO of a hospital in Connecticut. And let me repeat one point that he made that stuck with me. Just because we know the right thing to do doesn't mean we always do it. I did not come here for sympathy. I came here to be your partner. And it takes determination and spine. One observation I've made through all this is the keen sense my current caregivers have of the medical error that led to my diagnosis. Their goal was to get me well. And they have all said that they support me in what I do here today. Sorrel King and Dr. Atul Gawande and others have taken this issue head on and will tell you that the most common cause of error is a breakdown in communication. Why would we work so hard to be good at what we do and allow ourselves to fail because we don't communicate effectively? It seems senseless. It's costly to insurance companies, to business owners, and to families. The cost that troubles me the most is Who might have done without for all that was spent on me? And it should trouble you too. One thing I've learned from all this is medicine is more than just a science. It's also an art. It's a healing art. St. Francis tells us, if you work with your hands, you're a laborer. If you work with your hands and your mind, you are a craftsman. And if you work with your hands, your mind, and your heart, you're an artist. A number of times I've given this talk to the medical schools, and I leave them with this. Please don't lose your heart in your call to heal. Thank you.